There are many questions on the minds of Barbadians about the issues affecting the South Coast and also about the island's water supply. For the next 24 minutes, Director of Engineering at the Barbados Water Authority will answer some of those burning questions. But first, let's turn our attention to the injection wells, designed to alleviate some of the problems the island is facing on the South Coast. Here is a demonstration of how these wells are expected to work.
At the foot of the plant, we installed a valve. With this valve, we were able to divert the sewage off of the force main. To do that, we installed a diversion main that leads to the ridge where the wells are being drilled. The wells themselves are 17.4-inch diameter PVC pipe that extends 140 to 150 feet into the ground. They're sealed in place with cement bentonite grout. The wells are open hole down to 300 feet. The geology in the land is such that the first 85 feet is limestone rock, porous limestone rock. Between 85 to 140 to 150 feet below, it's beach sand. And below that, between 150 feet to 300 feet, is more fragmented limestone rock. We expect that the sewage we're injecting into the zone between 150 feet to 300 feet, that the sand layer, the very, very thick sand layer, about 45 feet thick, would act as a buffer or a filter in the unlikely, very unlikely event that the sewage was to rise. But we expect that the limestone below that sand layer would keep it down at that level. It would disperse into the limestone and hopefully out to sea.
The dye testing results came back favorably, and the wells should not negatively impact the environment, so work continues. Director of Engineering Charles Leslie gives us an update.
With the wells on the South Coast, when we looked at the geology over there and we looked at the results from our pump testing, because we did what you call step testing on the wells, that allowed us to determine the capacity of each well. Based on the capacity of the plant, it will take approximately 4 wells to be able to handle the capacity of the plant. But we want to have a reserve capacity there, because we know that going forward, you may get you may have to take one of the wells offline for cleaning and that type of stuff in the future. So we want to have some reserve capacity there. And the system is not completely built out now, so we still want to have that capacity there. So once we've completed the 4 wells, we are going to be looking to utilize them, those 4, but we are going to be building 2 additional wells to have a reserve capacity there. When we are going to be doing the injection, we're just applying a small head to the water that we're injecting. And that head is basically just to be able to force the water down the column. And if the water table rises, it just means that we will have to increase the head slightly to be able to force that down the water column. So that we have looked at that, and that should not be a major problem. With the new effluent pumps that we have at the plant that we would have installed before, those pumps are what you call variable speed pumps, variable frequency pumps, and we could adjust the head of those pumps to be able to achieve the pressures that we need to be able to get the water down the injection wells. And from the onset, we've been saying that we're not going to be using the injection wells for an extended period. They're only going to be used at this point to take the overflows off the street, and then when it comes to like repairs, when we're actually going to be doing the repairs on the streets, we're anticipating it will only take us a couple of days to do those repairs. We will use the wells. Once the repairs are done, we would, be closing those wells off for the next emergency.
people may not realize that what they dump into the sewer can actually damage the system.
Normally with properties, you have manholes or to intercept the manholes, and these are specifically designed to intercept the fats, oils, and greases before they enter the system. For each category of property, like for a domestic home, a restaurant, a hotel, they are sized appropriately. They should be sized appropriately for the volume of greases, fats, oils, and greases that are going to be generated on that property. What we have been finding is happening is that you have a change of use of properties. Some person may start out using the property as a domestic residence, and then they change to a cook shop or restaurant or something like that. But attention isn't paid to the grease traps and the manholes that should be used to intercept those oils and so forth before they get into the system. When those oils migrate into the system, once they pass their grease trap and they migrate into the system, it creates problems for us in the system, because they then stick to the pipes, the channels, the chambers, whatever. And when they begin to stick, then other extraneous materials begin to attach themselves to them, and over time it builds up. In the systems, we normally do maintenance, but when you have excessive fats, oils, and greases getting into the system, that obviously has an impact on the frequency at which we do the maintenance on the system. It causes us to do a lot more maintenance on the system in order to keep the flows and so forth, the gravity flows and the sanitary systems in check. So we would like to encourage the property owners to do frequent maintenance on their manholes and grease traps on their side of the properties, so that will reduce the frequency at which we have to go into the sanitary sewer lines and do cleaning over there. They can contact us to assist them with inspections or for advice on the best way to deal with the grease traps. They can contact us, or they contact the Environmental Protection Department. Because normally when you're looking at change of use, you have to go through the application process where you go to town planning. Town planning would normally send a copy of your drawings to the Environmental Protection Department, and that's one of the things that they look for. But sometimes it slips, and the property owners don't pay as much attention to the grease traps. They figure it's probably under the ground and out of sight. But it contributes to the frequency at which we have to do maintenance on the system.
Mr. Leslie also cleared the air about sewage being diverted.
We have not actually done any repairs to the major problems on the system, the sanitary line or the force main. What we have been doing is doing maintenance on our manholes. We're resealing some of the manholes. What we found over time, because of the acidic nature of the sewage, the cement and so forth around the manholes has become corroded or eroded. And what we have been doing is resealing some of those manholes to prevent that from coming up on the streets themselves. But because the problem is worsening every day, and there's no outlet other than through lower points in the system. That's why you're getting some of the problems on those customers, on those properties. But once we are in a position to do the diversion using the injection wells that we are constructing, we will be able to reduce that problem on the streets, because we obviously be able to reduce the level of the effluent in the system. And then all of those low points basically should feel less of an effect of the sewage coming into their properties. Because the system is so charged, anytime we seal up a location, like a manhole on the street or on some person's property, to start from spilling on the property, the sewage is still coming out. It has to relieve itself somewhere. So that's why you'll see by the bypass pump we have there, that may be worse than the flows on the street. Additionally, the restriction just upstream of that by the Old Scotia Bank, that could be getting worse. Every day we take off rags at the bypass pump. Some of those, I'm sure we're not taking off all of the rags. Some of those are passing and going towards that same restriction. So it could be worsening, we don't know. So there are a number of things that could be causing that to worsen. But if you cannot plug all of the points on that gravity sewer, because then the waste will look for some place to escape, and then that could create more pressures on the line itself. A gravity line is not designed to be under the type of pressure that one is being put under. So the more that we seal it, the more we put in stress on it. So for the time being, we're going to try to manage what we have done so far. We're trying to do cleanups on some of those properties where it's spilling. We have engaged a number of private haulers to help us. It's a hefty bill for the BWA, but it's something that we are doing in order to manage that situation.
The director explains what is to be expected in the weeks ahead as it relates to the South Coast.
Once we have completed the wells and we can do the diversion, what we want to do is go in and do some repairs, start some repairs, and to do further investigation of the gravity line. Because once we are diverting, that would be able to help drain the gravity line. The level should go down for us to be able to get in the new cameras that we have and do investigations in there. And once that is done, then we will determine the extent of the bypasses or repairs that we have to do on the sanitary line. We based on the testing that we would have done, we believe that the force main, it will be easy, relatively easy, not easy, but relatively easy to repair that one. But in terms of the gravity line, we don't know the extent of the damage on that. We could have had subsidence of the surrounding environment. That main would have gone with it. And with a gravity system, it is a lot more work to get it back rehabilitated or restored once you have damage on that. So there are a number of things that could have gone wrong with the gravity line, and that would determine the extent of whatever bypass or whatever we're going to be doing. We don't want to rush and go to the bypass, because if we do bypasses for both lines, gravity and force, that would mean creating new sumps to store the waste at the first point, and then installing pumps. And going forward, that would be an operational cost that you will be adding to the BWA. Electricity, changing pumps, periodically, that kind of stuff. The gravity system is always the best. That's the first system that was ever designed to move water around the place. So if it is possible to do repairs and get the gravity reestablished, that's what we would like to concentrate on, rather than the bypass first. The bypass is the extreme case if we have to go to that route. In the coming weeks, we are going to be sitting with some of the stakeholders in the area and along that whole coast to plan how we are going to be dealing with the repairs. Because we may have to do some diversions on the road, that type of stuff. So we'll be sitting with them, we'll have meetings with them to determine the best way forward, how we deal with the emergency vehicles if we have to do diversions on the road and that type of stuff.
Now, let's turn our attention to Barbados' rainfall as it relates to our potable water. The Director of Engineering also clears up the myth that having a few weeks of steady rain means our water problems will be solved.
When we look at it, the drought conditions that we had in 2014 and 15, those were exceptional. What was happening is that we were managing the fresh water that we had in the system by skimming as much of it as possible off so that we could supply fresh water to the customers. But that was an extensive drought. I think that drought was worse than any that we had in recent times. Like say, it was probably worse than even the 2005 drought. So what we were doing is end up mining off a lot of the fresh water. So we now need a couple of years, because we went through like probably 2 years of mining that water off. We need a couple of years to relatively good rainfall like we had last year to be able to replenish what we remove from the aquifers in terms of the storage. We had a good year last year. We are hoping that we can get a good year this year, and that hopefully will replenish the water in the aquifers. We have seen on the west coast of the island, where we normally have problems with salinity, we have seen an improvement in a number of the wells, but there's still some, although they are improving slowly. Like for instance, Molyneux has shown some improvement, but slowly. Ashton Hall has shown some improvement. We have wells like at Wim and Haymans. The improvement there was a lot better than some of the other areas, but we know if we encounter a dry period again, those wells are still going to be under a lot of stress. So we need continued rainfall like we did last year to be able to replenish those aquifers.
The reality is, everyone on the island has to do his or her part to help conserve Barbados's water supply.
We always encourage the public to conserve water, because obviously every drop that the public conserves, obviously it reduces the burden on the Barbados Water Authority to supply that fresh water from our aquifers. So we're always encouraging the customers to conserve. And from the Barbados Water Authority's point of view, we are also looking at the reduction in terms of leakage and so forth. We actually are looking at going into a program now where we are going to be looking at trying to reduce as much as possible our non-revenue water. Non-revenue water is the difference between what you're putting into the system and what you get revenue for, basically. So we are aggressively going after that non-revenue water component to see how we can bring that down as quickly as possible. We would have concentrated on like the changing of the customer meters. Within the last year or two, we would have changed a lot of our production meters so that we know we have we have more accurate figures as to what we're putting into the systems. And we are now going to be looking at metering, doing sub-metering within the distribution system itself to help us to be able to get to leaks faster and to know exactly and to identify where the problems are in the system, where you have more leakage, where you have more leakage one place than the other. What we are doing in terms of the sub-metering, it is called district metering. So we break the distribution system into a number of smaller components. Because if you know overall what you're putting into the system and you do a subtraction of what you're billing the customers for, you have an idea of your non-revenue water. But knowing the precise locations of that non-revenue water now, it takes a little bit more effort. And these sub-meters that we're putting into the system breaks the system up into a number of smaller areas, so then you will be able to pinpoint exactly where your major problems are in the system. So we're putting in a number of smaller meters into the system.
I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, but has this work started as yet, or how soon do you all expect this to be?
Well, we are in the process now of procurement. This sub-metering of the system is going to be funded by the CDB, the loan that we have gotten approved from the Caribbean Development Bank. So we're now in the process of procuring those sub-meters, quantifying all of the materials that we required to install those sub-meters into the system.
The BWA still plans to continue working on alternative ways to provide water to the island.
We are always constantly looking at alternatives for supplying water. 2 large seawater desalination plants have been approved. And we're in the process now of working with those contractors to look at the geology, hydrogeology basically. Both of them have done testing. They've done boreholes, look at the geology of the island, and they've done testing on the quality of the water. They're actually at the process now where they're doing modeling of the environments. One is proposed to be at Harrison's Point and the other at Ealing Grove in Christchurch. And they're pretty advanced in terms of all of the preliminary work for those plants. The minister spoken about it a number of times. We believe that as a result of the changes to the weather patterns, where we're going to be getting more frequent dry periods, and then when we do get rain, it's going to come in deluges so that you will get a lot of runoff. We will have to look to alternative sources of supply. And those two desalination plants will pretty much give us like 100% reserve capacity in terms of the supply, the fresh water supply. In the future, we're also going to be looking at other alternatives. We're going to be looking at wastewater reuse as well. We may be looking at it for agricultural purposes and that type of stuff. But we're always constantly looking at how best to use the resources.
Rest assured that the Barbados Water Authority is working tirelessly to try to find solutions to alleviate the problems on the South Coast. In addition, since water conservation is also part of its remit, efforts will continue to educate Barbadians to be part of the solution.
You can find more government information by visiting our website, gisbarbados.gov.bb. Like and follow us on these social media platforms under the handle GIS Barbados, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, the BGIS.